Hello, my name is Hope, and I am the family scapegoat. Welcome back to another episode of the Scapegoat Speaks. I believe I became the scapegoat when the golden child was born. The golden child was a highly coveted boy. He was placed upon the highest pedestal. Of all the siblings, he was treated as the most grand, got the most privileges, autonomy, etc. When I graduated high school, I received a tiny piece of jewelry, but the golden child got a brand new Mustang. How were the parents not ashamed of showing such favoritism and disdain for the other children? Being the eldest daughter, I was expected to help take care of younger siblings and do things such as babysitting, changing diapers, and once I was old enough to drive, the chauffeur. I was responsible for siblings' wrongdoings if I was in their proximity. As I mentioned in my last video, the parentified and scapegoat role started as early as 4 years old, but I fear it was much earlier. For me, the mental abuse was harsher and harder to overcome than the physical. My mother would call me a stupid idiot for something simple like not unlatching the gate quick enough. Because I was an overachiever, she made slight of that too, calling me a jack of all trades but a master of none. The older I got and the more I excelled, I felt like my mother treated me more like competition or a threat than a daughter. Those insults stung, but they were also the fuel for my fire to excel later in life. To this day, if someone tells me I can't, it's the biggest motivator to prove them wrong. When I went through puberty, my mother made fun of me, laughed, and pointed out the bodily changes. To add insult to injury, she got the siblings to join in on the ridicule. I would hunch over to prevent my shirt from touching my chest. I was embarrassed to wear a swimsuit without a t-shirt. I was embarrassed and ashamed of myself and my body, and I had zero control over it. As an adult, I dressed more so on the conservative side. I never felt quite comfortable in a bikini and didn't wear skimpy clothing. I didn't expect my siblings to continue the belittling behavior into adulthood. However, now I realize I shouldn't have been surprised. Just like I was trained to feel guilt, shame, and blame, they were also taught I was the one who could be saddled with their guilt, shame, blame, and shortcomings. They learned by example. That was the most devastating revelation for me. I knew my parents were horrible narcissists, but I thought my siblings were different. I had asked an adult sibling a simple question about how to operate a machine and was admonished with, "For someone who's supposedly so smart, you sure ask a lot of stupid questions." Was the sibling projecting her insecurity about her own lack of education and using the opportunity to show superiority? Or was she trying to keep me in my inferior scapegoat role? I think it was a mix of both. How did I cope with all of this when I was growing up? As a child, and until I was in my early teens, I had convinced myself that I was adopted. That was my coping mechanism. I couldn't fathom parents hating, beating, and being that mean to a child that was really their own, so I figured I must have been adopted. That fantasy gave me hope that someday my real parents would come and rescue me from the hellish people who were pretending to be my parents. I was devastated when I realized they really were my parents. My dreams of being rescued were gone. Even now, as an adult, I'm able to look back at the experience as more of an outsider looking in. I did such a fantastic job at compartmentalizing the abuse that I see my child self as another person. I feel bad for how that child was treated and abused, but I don't feel sorry for myself. I do think that this has helped me to move forward easier instead of feeling the entire brunt of the pain. In my late high school and college years, I was no longer physically beat, but the mental abuse and gaslighting ramped up. Even when I was in college, I had to be home before dark unless I was working or in class. They set the house alarm at night, yet I was still accused of sneaking out of the house, which was impossible without setting off alarms. Yet, an accusation didn't require proof because I was deemed guilty. The accusations were so strong that I felt sick and guilty for doing something I hadn't done. My senior year of high school is when I had my first bout of anxiety and depression. At that time, I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I thought I was going crazy. I even went to the doctor and had them run blood tests, but I didn't know how to quite describe the issues I was having, so they never did diagnose me with depression and anxiety. As an adult, I thought the siblings would have a common trauma bond due to us having grown up in a toxic environment surrounded by narcissistic parents and substance abuse. I thought we'd have some commonality, but that was not the case. I finally realized we really didn't all have the same experience because everyone was in fact treated very differently. Nobody else experienced the guilt, shame, and blame like the scapegoat. Nobody else benefited like the golden child. The pretty one's persona was built around superficial things. The youngest sibling was spoiled and entitled. They left the middle child alone until she took over the primary scapegoat role. She suddenly became a problem child after I left the toxic house. As adults, the siblings were all content with keeping the roles, hierarchy, and me as a scapegoat. Even after not having lived in the family house for many years, the parents still doubled down on the scapegoat smear campaigns. They would make up blatant lies, which leaked out, but I wasn't allowed to confront the storyteller. All the while, I was excelling in college and work, but it didn't matter. Excellence didn't fit the role of a scapegoat, so they'd bring up that a friend's daughter made X amount in her profession. It was completely irrelevant to anything other than to make me feel small and unaccomplished. If I had made $1 million, they would have found someone better to compare me to. The scapegoat never wins. They made up lies about substance abuse, infidelity, and reminded the other siblings I was not to be trusted because I was selfish. I would later find out the infidelity accusations were projection. Shocking, right? Placing myself first in anything and having autonomy solidified their view of me being a horrible, selfish person. No amount of giving or helping the parents or siblings was ever enough. They would take and not even say thank you. I'm embarrassed and ashamed I put up with it for as long as I did. When I was 18, I had donated a few bags of food after a natural disaster had struck. It felt good to help with what little I could. My mother had found out and told my father what I did. She asked him, "What do you think of what your daughter did?" I don't recall his response, but I remember feeling uncomfortable, awkward, and somehow wrong, and didn't understand why she would do that. The reality is that my selfless donation made them feel uncomfortable because their scapegoat didn't conform to the assigned role. Showing empathy towards others contradicted the image they projected upon me, and it made them look like the liars. I do believe that's why I always gave anonymously as an adult. If I wanted to help, I learned to keep it hidden so I wouldn't be put in the spotlight because there was no such thing as a positive spotlight. Through the years, what they did to me to keep me in my scapegoat role changed, but I was never let out of that role. I spent the better part of my adult life trying to amount to something that my parents and family would be proud of, but I realized it was an impossible goal. In the next episode, I'll dive a little deeper into the various ways the scapegoat role is passed on from generation to generation, what that looked like, and how I finally escaped. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Scapegoat Speaks. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.